Imagine standing in a room full of people you love, respect, and depend on, only to realize that when you speak about your deepest dreams, your highest ambitions, or the version of yourself you are desperately trying to build, all you get back is a wall of blank stares, polite smiles, or outright skepticism. It is a terrifyingly lonely feeling when the people around you look at your potential and see absolutely nothing, leaving you to wonder if you are the one who is losing their mind. But what if I told you that this exact moment of isolation is not the tragedy you think it is, but rather the single most critical evolutionary test of your life, designed to separate the person you used to be from the person you are actually capable of becoming? The truth is that waiting for other people to validate your vision before you begin working on it is like waiting for a car to move without putting fuel in the tank. It simply will not happen, and today we are going to break down the psychological, emotional, and practical framework you need to navigate this dark space so you can turn the crushing weight of public doubt into the raw fuel that propels you toward your ultimate destiny. When you first decide to change your life, whether that means launching a new business, reversing a chronic health condition, breaking away from toxic family patterns, or pursuing a creative passion that leaves your peers scratching their heads, you naturally expect a cheering section. We are tribal creatures by nature, wired deep within our neurobiology to seek safety in numbers and approval from the collective, which means that when the tribe pulls back their approval, your brain processes that social rejection through the exact same neural pathways that handle physical pain. This is why it hurts so deeply when a spouse, a parent, or a lifelong friend looks at your new trajectory and tells you that you are being unrealistic, or worse, laughs at your ambition. But as an expert who has watched thousands of people navigate this exact threshold, I need you to understand a foundational truth right now. People do not refuse to believe in you because they lack love for you. They refuse to believe in you because they lack the imagination to see what has not happened yet. And more importantly, your growth threatens the comfortable equilibrium of their own static lives. When someone looks at you, they are looking at a walking archive of your past mistakes, your childhood vulnerabilities, and your established habits, meaning they are completely blind to the internal shift that has just occurred inside your mind. They cannot feel the fire that woke you up at 4 o'clock this morning. They cannot see the books you are reading in secret, and they certainly cannot comprehend the quiet desperation that is driving you to demand more from your existence. Therefore, asking them to believe in your future self is asking them to perform an act of blind faith that most human beings are simply not equipped to handle, especially when your sudden desire to evolve forces them to look in the mirror and confront their own unfulfilled potential. When you say you want to achieve something extraordinary, the unspoken implication to the people around you is that they have settled for something ordinary, and rather than doing the hard work of elevating their own lives, it is infinitely easier for them to pull you back down to earth by telling you that your goals are impossible, foolish, or bound for disaster. Understanding this psychological dynamic is your first step toward emotional immunity, because the moment you stop taking their skepticism personally, you can stop wasting your precious, limited creative energy trying to convince them that you are right. One of the most destructive mistakes you can make when nobody believes in you is turning into a salesman for your own potential, spending hours arguing, explaining, and debating your vision over dinner tables or in text threads, hoping that if you just find the right combination of words, they will finally give you the permission slip you think you need. Let me save you years of heartbreak right now. You will never talk someone into believing in your dream, because belief is not built on promises, it is built on proof, and until you have the physical, undeniable receipts of your execution, your words will only sound like defensive noise to a skeptical world. Your job during this period of isolation is not to convert the non-believers, but to go entirely underground with your execution, protecting your fragile new ambitions from the cold wind of external opinions until those ambitions have grown deep enough roots to survive on their own. Think about a seed planted deep in the soil. It spends its first few weeks in absolute darkness, surrounded by dirt, completely invisible to the outside world, and if it demanded that the sun admire its beauty before it bothered to grow, it would simply rot in the earth. It must trust the internal blueprint encoded within its DNA, pushing upward through the heavy, suffocating pressure of the soil without a single cheer or a single round of applause, until it finally breaks through the surface and forces the world to acknowledge its existence. You are currently in the dirt phase of your development, and trying to pull your friends and family into that darkness to show them what you are working on will only disrupt the delicate process of your transformation. This means you must practice a high level of strategic silence, an intentional locking away of your grandest plans from the ears of those who have proven themselves incapable of holding them with reverence. If you have a friend who always makes a sarcastic comment when you talk about your diet, stop talking to them about your health. If you have a parent who panics every time you mention entrepreneurship, stop sharing your business strategy with them. This is not about cutting people off out of anger or resentment. It is about establishing healthy emotional boundaries to protect the mental real estate you need to execute your daily habits. To survive this period of absolute isolation, you must transition from a state of external dependence to a state of radical internal self-sustaining authority, which requires you to completely overhaul your relationship with validation. If you look closely at the most impactful figures in human history, from the innovators who revolutionized medicine to the visionaries who built global industries, every single one of them had to walk through a multi-year wilderness where the collective consensus was that they were completely out of their minds. If they had relied on the applause of their contemporaries to keep going, their ideas would have died in the laboratory, meaning that the capacity to tolerate being misunderstood is actually a core prerequisite for achieving anything of lasting significance. You have to become your own investor, your own coach, and your own primary fan base, waking up every single morning and looking into the mirror to tell yourself that the vision in your head is real, valid, and worthy of your suffering, regardless of how many people disagreed with you the night before. This level of self-belief cannot be a fragile, superficial form of arrogance. It must be a deep, unshakable, quiet conviction rooted in your willingness to do the boring, unglamorous, uncelebrated work when nobody is watching. This brings us to the actual mechanics of execution, because the only thing that bridges the gap between where you are now and the day the world finally believes in you is the consistency of your daily output. When you lack external support, your margin for error shrinks drastically, meaning you cannot afford the luxury of waiting for inspiration to strike, nor can you afford to let your emotions dictate whether or not you fulfill your promises to yourself. If you only work on your goals when you feel motivated, or when someone leaves a supportive comment on your social media, you are handing the remote control of your destiny over to random external variables that you cannot control. Instead, you need to build an airtight daily routine that automates your progress, turning your ambition into a series of non-negotiable habits that require zero emotional consensus to execute. If you are writing a book, you write your 500 words at dawn before the rest of the house wakes up. If you are changing your physique, you pack your meals and hit the gym regardless of whether your friends are making fun of your lifestyle choices. Over time, this relentless, daily execution does something magical to your internal chemistry. It builds what psychologists call self-efficacy, which is the deeply rooted belief in your own ability to succeed based on your history of keeping promises to yourself. Every time you set an alarm for 5 o'clock and actually get out of bed, every time you choose the healthy meal over the convenient junk, and every time you spend an hour studying instead of scrolling through your phone, you are casting a vote for the new identity you want to inhabit. Eventually, the pile of these daily votes becomes so massive, and your internal foundation becomes so solid, that the opinions of external onlookers begin to lose their power entirely, turning from a deafening roar into a faint, meaningless background hum. You stop caring whether they believe in you or not, because you have built a mountain of evidence within your own private life that proves you are a person who gets things done, and that internal certainty is infinitely more powerful than the temporary, fickle approval of a crowd. However, as you walk this path of solitary execution, you must also be highly vigilant against the dangerous pitfalls that often trap people when they feel rejected by their peer group, the most common of which is falling into a toxic trap of bitterness and spite. It is incredibly easy to let the skepticism of others warp your mind into a dark, resentful place where your entire motivation becomes proving everyone wrong, driving you to work out of a sense of vengeance rather than a sense of purpose. While a prove them wrong mentality can certainly provide a short-term burst of adrenaline to get you started, it is a highly toxic, unsustainable fuel source for a 40-year journey, because it keeps your focus completely externalized, anchoring your emotional state to the very people who doubted you in the first place. If you are building a life just to spite your ex, or to show your high school classmates that they were wrong about you, you are still allowing them to dictate the terms of your existence, and even if you win the prize, you will find yourself sitting at the top of the mountain with a heart full of cold, empty resentment. Your ultimate goal must be to transition your motivation from a negative, external reaction to a positive, internal obsession with your own potential, moving away from proving them wrong and moving toward proving your inner vision right. You want to build an environment where your energy is focused entirely on the beauty of the craft, the health of your body, and the impact of your work, rather than looking over your shoulder to see if the people who doubted you are watching you succeed. When you operate from this place of clean, internal alignment, you also protect yourself from the sudden, destabilizing shifts that occur when the people who used to doubt you suddenly change their tune and start trying to celebrate with you. Make no mistake about it. The moment your results become too big to ignore, the very people who laughed at your initial steps will begin telling everyone how they always knew you had it in you, and if your entire identity is built on fighting them, their sudden support will leave you completely disoriented and stripped of your motivation. Another critical error to avoid during this lonely phase is the tendency to completely isolate yourself from the entire human race under the guise of the lone wolf mentality. While it is absolutely true that you must protect your vision from your current social circle if they are unsupportive, you cannot survive the long-term journey toward greatness in an absolute relational vacuum. We still need connection, mentorship, and community. You simply need to expand your horizons to find a new tribe that operates at the level of your future, rather than staying trapped in the tribe of your past. In our modern digital age, there is absolutely zero excuse for remaining completely isolated, because the greatest minds, the most disciplined athletes, and the most successful innovators in the world have left their thoughts, their strategies, and their support systems widely accessible through books, podcasts, online communities, and educational platforms. If the people in your immediate physical environment cannot understand your ambition, you must intentionally curate your digital environment, filling your ears and your mind with the voices of people who have already walked the path you are currently trying to forge. Let the authors of the greatest books ever written become your temporary counsel. Let the daily audio of elite performers become the soundtrack to your commute, creating an immersive mental bubble that counteracts the negative programming you might be receiving from your immediate surroundings. As you continue to grow and execute, you will naturally begin to attract new, real-life relationships with people who see your drive, respect your work ethic, and mirror your values, leading to a natural, organic shift in your social circle. You will find that you no longer have to beg people to understand your goals, because you will be surrounded by peers who are running just as fast as you are, pushing you to climb even higher rather than trying to anchor you to the valley floor. But this new community will only find you if you stay on the path long enough to cross into their territory, which means you must endure the lonely border crossing between your old life and your new one without giving up when the terrain gets rough. It is also worth noting that this process of building a life when nobody believes in you requires you to develop a radical new perspective on failure, reshaping it from an emotional catastrophe into a vital, data-gathering mechanism. When you are pursuing a goal in a skeptical environment, any mistake you make will immediately be seized upon by the doubters as definitive proof that they were right all along, and they will be more than happy to say "I told you so" the moment you stumble. If you view failure as a shameful validation of their skepticism, you will become paralyzed by the fear of making a mistake, causing you to play small, hesitate during critical moments, or abandon your efforts altogether at the first sign of trouble. You have to realize that every single failure is just a neutral piece of feedback telling you that your strategy needs adjustment, carrying absolutely zero weight regarding your worth as a human being or your ultimate capacity to succeed. When a laboratory experiment fails, the scientist does not throw their hands up in despair and assume they are a failure. They simply note what did not work, adjust the variables, and run the next test, which is exactly how you must approach the inevitable setbacks on your journey. If your first business venture goes under, or if your health journey hits a plateau, or if your creative project gets zero engagement, you do not look at that as proof that your doubters were right. You look at it as a masterclass in what not to do next time, using that data to sharpen your execution for the next iteration. The only way the skeptics actually win is if their criticism convinces you to stop testing your limits, because the moment you quit, you retroactively validate every single negative thing they ever said about you, turning their uneducated guesses into an absolute, historical fact. But if you refuse to stop, if you treat every single drop of rejection and every single failed attempt as an iterative step toward your ultimate mastery, you become an unstoppable force that cannot be broken by the opinions of others. You must develop a stubborn, almost unreasonable level of resilience that looks at a room full of critics and decides that their doubt is simply a reflection of their current limitations, not a boundary line for your future achievements. To maintain this level of endurance week after week, month after month, you must also learn how to manage your emotional energy with a high degree of precision, ensuring that you are not leaking your vital focus into useless avenues. This means you must ruthlessly audit your consumption habits, paying close attention to the media you ingest, the thoughts you dwell on during your downtime, and the internal narrative you repeat to yourself when things go wrong. When you are operating without an external support system, your mind is constantly searching for threats and signs of danger, making it incredibly easy to spiral into anxiety, self-doubt, and mental fatigue if you are constantly feeding your brain a diet of chaotic news, negative digital content, and superficial comparisons. You need to treat your mind like a high-performance athletic facility, keeping the gates strictly guarded against any garbage that could compromise your focus, and intentionally filling it with high-quality information, structured rest, and constructive self-reflection. Practice the art of celebrating your own small, invisible wins at the end of every single day, taking 30 seconds before you close your eyes to look back at the tasks you completed and acknowledging that you did your job, regardless of whether anyone else noticed or cared. These tiny moments of self-administered recognition are the bricks that build an impenetrable fortress of self-esteem, allowing you to sleep with a sense of peace that is entirely independent of the world's praise. Remember that the journey of self-transformation is fundamentally a long-distance endurance race, not a short, frantic sprint, meaning that the person who can tolerate the most loneliness, the most monotony, and the most unapplauded days with a calm, composed heart is the person who will ultimately cross the finish line. Do not look for the quick fix. Do not expect the people around you to suddenly wake up tomorrow morning with a massive revelation about your genius, and do not let the slow pace of your initial progress trick you into thinking that you are failing. True, systemic change in your life takes time, requiring an extended period of quiet accumulation before the visible, explosive results finally break through to the surface for everyone else to see. When you look back at this difficult chapter of your life 10 years from now, standing from the peak of the success you are currently trying to build, you will realize that this season of isolation was actually the greatest gift you could have ever received. It was the fire that burned away your need for people-pleasing, the training ground that forced you to develop real internal discipline, and the filter that showed you exactly who belongs in your future and who needs to be left in your past. You will look back at the people who doubted you not with anger, bitterness, or a desire to gloat, but with a profound, quiet sense of gratitude, because their skepticism was the very whetstone that sharpened your resolve and forced you to become genuinely elite. So dry your tears, stop waiting for the approval that is never going to come, close your mouth, and get back to work on the quiet, daily habits that will build the undeniable proof of your destiny. When you find yourself in that heavy place where nobody believes in you, remember that the initial pain of social rejection is merely an evolutionary signal that you are breaking away from the herd to find higher ground, and your survival depends entirely on your willingness to shift from seeking external validation to executing non-negotiable daily habits in silence. By establishing strict emotional boundaries, avoiding the toxic trap of spiteful motivation, and viewing every inevitable failure as neutral data for your next attempt, you will slowly build an airtight foundation of self-efficacy that forces the world to eventually acknowledge your results. If you found this information valuable, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and let me know in the comments what topic you want to see next.